You're watching Indonesia Now from Jakarta. Our Asia Watch begins in Myanmar. Hundreds of representatives of Myanmar's ethnic tribes have gathered in the country's capital for historic peace talks on Wednesday. The conference was aimed at ending decades of violence between the Myanmar army and various ethnic separatists that has claimed thousands of lives and forced hundreds of thousands to flee their home. The 5-day talk were attended by representatives of 17 of the 20 major ethnicities. Leader Aung San Suu Kyi promised that her government will guarantee rebel groups equal rights and respect in the peace talks that her government organized. Also speaking at the conference, United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who held the historic peace talks, and urged all sides to work towards a better tomorrow. Malaysians celebrated their Independence Day with a parade in Merdeka Square in the heart of Kuala Lumpur on Wednesday. The parade featured military and police units and various dance performances by local troops. Prime Minister Najib Razak and His Majesty the King of Malaysia, Sultan Abdul Halim Muazzam Shah, attended the event. Thousands of attendees waved flags to show their support, while others wore shirts with national flag prints. Malaysia gained its independence from Britain in 1957. Since then, ruling party United Malay Nationalist Organization UMNO has ruled the country, making it one of the longest ruling political parties in the world. Britain's step to leave the European Union drove the world into a flurry. Prime Ministerial Trade Envoy for ASEAN, Richard Graham, stopped by to talk with Indonesia Now's Iqbal Himawan about the effect it has on Indonesia and ASEAN.
How has Brexit has changed Britain's economy so far? Because I saw your article. It says Brexit poses a trade conundrum, but it can be solved.
That's absolutely right, Iqbal. I mean, my sense of Brexit is that it's just like the Chinese word for crisis, wei ji, which means danger or opportunity. So the dangers were in the short-term confidence issue, the short-term surprise for business and indeed for politicians, and the opportunity is in the longer-term positioning of global Britain as a country that's focused as much on the rest of the world as it has been in the past on Europe. And so if we look at the opportunities, I think the relationship between the UK and Indonesia can grow much faster when we don't subcontract our trade agreements to a third party, the EU, and we can just focus with Indonesia on what will be the most important elements of our trade and investment relationship.
What's going to be the greatest barrier or challenge that we need to overcome to increase the bilateral trade between Indonesia and UK?
I guess, there are two key things, really. One is the agenda of liberalizing and opening up Indonesia more to foreign investment. There are still quite a lot of restrictions. Projects like PPP, public-private partnerships, I think will only really take off outside the toll roads, which have been successful. But for things like airports, will only take off when Indonesia is really confident to actually give foreign companies effectively a contract to run an airport in line with all the regulations and laws. So as this agenda moves forward, as the Indonesian parliament gets more confident about changing the laws and opening up and seeing this as good for Indonesia, good for competition, good for bringing prices down, and good for employment, then I think we'll see more UK manufacturing investment in Indonesia.
Okay, looking forward for that, of course. And then about the bilateral trade between the United Kingdom and ASEAN community, do you see any changes after the Brexit has decided?
I think what's happening in the UK is that we're much more aware of the growth markets of Asia than we used to. By the way, a lot of people use the term emerging markets or developing markets. For me, this is nonsense. I mean, Indonesia emerged thousands of years ago. It's been developing for a very, very long time. We should call it what it is, which is a growth market. And the growth in Indonesia, in the Philippines, in ASEAN in general, is much greater than in Europe or even in the UK. So seeing that trend, I think the UK and Indonesia can continue to have very high percentage increases of trade. By the way, it's a surplus in the balance for Indonesia. So we're a good market for Indonesian goods. And this can accelerate quite fast from quite a small base.
So you prefer to use the word growth instead of emerging that's been
Definitely.
mentioned over and over, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
And then how about the relationship between the UK is still trying to working on the relationship with the European Union?
Yeah.
And then how do you see the relationship between European Union and ASEAN community after the Brexit?
Yes. So I think there are two aspects to that. One is, I mean, the UK is still part of Europe. Nothing is going to change on that. We're, if you like, the offshore islands of continental Europe. And we'll always have close relationship with European friends and partners. We've got lots of bilateral agreements with the French, for example, on security issues. Those will continue. What will change is simply that we won't be a member of the European Union, which really has been the source of so much of our legislation. I mean, imagine if Indonesia was outsourcing a lot of your legislation to the ASEAN Economic Community, and they were also doing your trade agreement negotiations for you. I don't think Indonesia would be very happy with that. And I think that's been the issue for us. We want to try and take back greater control over our trade negotiations, but also the legislation and the laws that we design. But the overall friendship and the core role of the UK working with the EU, that will continue as it has done over hundreds of years. Now the EU-ASEAN, I think, is evolving. Indonesia started your trade negotiations with the EU, the SEPA as it's called, and I think Pak Jokowi hopes to conclude those negotiations in about 2 years.
Okay.
We'll be a part of that until we leave the European Union. And that will probably be the starting point for a discussion about how to have something separate, just for the UK and Indonesia.
Okay, you see a bright future in the bilateral trade between
Betul,
Indonesia and
Pak.
UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then in what
Kalau
area?
saya boleh bicara bahasa Indonesia,
sure.
saya merasakan di kesempatan jauh lebih banyak daripada bahaya yang menghadang di depan, as far as the Brexit relationship for UK and Indonesia is concerned.
So
More opportunities than danger.
more opportunities than danger. That's
Yeah.
the key. And then in what sector do you see that hold the biggest potential in a trade bilateral relationship between Indonesia and UK?
Yeah. Well, the big ticket issues are always things like energy. You've seen the 8 billion investment from BP in Tangguh 3. Aerospace is always big. Garuda and Lion Air are expanding their fleets of Airbuses and Rolls-Royce engines. Also, other oil and gas companies like Ophir are doing the first gas project in central Kalimantan. I think this is in line with Pak Jokowi's intention and drive to see more investment in the remoter parts of the archipelago. But some of the smaller things can be really interesting, like creative media. I'd like to see more Indonesian films being shown in the UK, more Indonesian designs, creative work, textiles. Indonesia's got so much to offer, and the world needs to know more about it. So you can use London as your sort of international showcase.
And then how about the education and also our company opportunities after the Brexit? Do you see any big changes in these sectors?
Well, I think there'll be a continuing increase in the number of Indonesians who go to university in the UK. I think we're now number 2 or 2.5 behind the US and maybe Australia, which is closer, of course.
Yeah.
But I think there's more that could be done. I mean, I'd love to see UK universities and schools opening in Indonesia, as we've done in Malaysia, because then you can get the benefits of international education without the expense of traveling and having to live in the UK, and also it's a bit colder there, so Indonesians probably feel more comfortable in the climate here. So that's a potential opportunity in the future.
Okay, about the company opportunities, do you see, especially we have our majority is small sector, small economics. Do you think it can be one of the potential relationships between UK and Indonesia?
Yes, I agree. I mean, for example, GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, is the world's biggest pharmaceutical company. It's a UK company, and at the moment they don't really manufacture in Asia. So I think there's an opportunity for them to, for example, to set up their vaccine business in Indonesia and then export all around ASEAN and even to China from here. But we probably need to look closely at the regulations and the requirement on whether they can have a majority shareholding in that sort of business, whether they can partner with biopharma. You know, there are a lot of details for these things, but the opportunity, I think, is there.
Okay, you keep talking about the opportunity. On your last visit here, up until now, you met some of our ministers. What is actually your focus or your goals to, you know, pursue your short-term goals in the near future?
Yes. So there are quite a lot of good examples where the UK manufacturers are gradually outsourcing more to Indonesia, either for assembly or manufacturing. For example, you've got British Aerospace, which is working with PT Pindad. You've got Rolls-Royce, which is working with Garuda. These are good examples of world-class businesses which are gradually sourcing in their supply chain using Indonesian companies much more than they used to. And I think aviation and aerospace is a huge growth industry for Indonesia and for Asia. And this will be really important in the future.
The Brexit process will be completed by the end of 2016 with an additional 2 years for the entire transition. More of Indonesia Now shortly. We'll take a look at how a foundation reaches underprivileged children by teaching art and circus skills. And we'll experience paragliding.